Hello and welcome to another edition of the NBA Outlet presented by OTGBasketball.com. Be sure to follow OTG on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us, please, on iTunes. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Harris Wichard and special guest, OTG writer, Jonathan Ebrahimi. What's up, guys?
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me back. It's good to be back and talk some basketball.
What's up, man? Jonathan, it's great to have you on today. I know this week and especially tomorrow and then Thursday, Friday, college basketball is to the forefront, but we still got, the NBA season coming down the stretch here and a lot to discuss. So happy to be with you guys today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to watch a little bit of March Madness, but the NBA is always superior for me. And today we're going to talk about superior. We're going to talk about superior players. So on OTG, every month we update our rankings. We rank the top 5 players at each position as well as the 30 teams in the league. But we're going to start with the players. We're going to start with the point guard position. Most activity this year, most hype. At number 1, we got Russell Westbrook. Number 2, James Harden. Number 3, Steph Curry. Number 4, Isaiah Thomas. And number 5, John Wall. Initial thoughts on this. What would you change? What do you hate? What do you like?
Well, as great of a season as Isaiah Thomas is having, and as much as I love watching him play, I don't think Isaiah Thomas is a top 5 point guard in the league. John Wall has done a lot this season to get himself in the top 5. Whether or not you would put a Kyrie Irving or a Kyle Lowry in that spot, that would come down to personal preference. The top 3 are pretty much set in stone. You can put them in whichever order you want. I don't see too much difference in the top 3, but yeah, I'd maybe put Kyrie in the top 5 instead of Isaiah, but he's having a great season. So I don't hate him in the top 5, but I really don't see him as a top 5 point guard.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And as well, I'll mention, I think Chris Paul, I know personally, and Kyle Lowry, I didn't involve in my rankings because these are based off of like recent active play. So this isn't like overall who's the top 5 in the league. It's at the play that they're playing at right now in this season. So I think Lowry and Chris Paul are kind of off that list. And I agree with Jonathan. I don't have IT, definitely not above John Wall. If you want to put him in the top 5 when I mentioned Lowry and Paul are out, I can live with that. He's having a great season. He's averaging over 30 points a game. He's been super clutch in the fourth quarter. Steph Curry's cool at 3, and James Harden and Russell Westbrook are kind of interchangeable.
Yeah, in January, I gave up with making the argument that Curry's still better than Westbrook and Harden are just having too good of seasons to start complaining about that. But I think the Isaiah Thomas, and me and Nick had mentioned this a little bit, fantasy-wise, is the buzz has slowed down a little bit. I think if you asked this 2 weeks ago, Jonathan, I think maybe you would have maybe less of an issue. I think his play has dipped a little bit. I think it's amazing that we live in a world now in the NBA where, Kyrie Irving and Chris Paul aren't top 5 point guards. It's just a load.
Well, Chris Paul's not on there because at the time that these rankings were submitted, he was out for a month and he'd only had played a game or 2.
It's just so difficult. I think it's of these rankings to go 4 or 5 in the point guard slot might be one of the more difficult things to do. It's just there's a lot of guys out there, like you guys mentioned. Lowry is definitely in consideration, but I think I would slide Irving in there and maybe Wall at 6. I know Wall's been terrific this year, and I love.
No way. I could not take John Wall out. And first off, he's already better than Isaiah Thomas, and I know I'll catch plenty of hate for that. But John Wall plays defense. He's averaging like 23 points a game, over 10 assists. It's great Isaiah Thomas scores 30 points a game, but he's.
Well, I agree. I think Wall's better than Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah. So if anything, I would swap Isaiah Thomas and Kyrie and put Kyrie at 5 and Wall at 4. Yeah. I could not take John Wall out. I feel like he already gets so much disrespect in this league. I remember I had a Twitter argument with I don't want to say his name. I'd embarrass him on the show again, but a Twitter argument with someone trying to tell me Mike Conley was better than John Wall. Get out of my face. I think this year people are starting to realize how good John Wall is because the Wizards are having some success.
Yeah.
Well, Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think Wall. I mean, you hear Isaiah's name in the MVP conversation, and like Nick said, Wall does get some disrespect. I just think Kyrie deserves to have his name in the hat, and it's hard to imagine taking Thomas out, averaging 30 points, nearly 30 points a game. But it's just it's such a competitive position right now.
Well, when I'm looking at the difference between Isaiah Thomas and John Wall is what they're asked to do by their team. Isaiah Thomas has one job, and that's score. Right? With John Wall, he's asked to play, be one of their best perimeter defenders, be a playmaker on the offensive side, score. He's asked to do a lot, even rebound for a guard, he's asked to
Yeah.
do a lot of rebounding. So I think he impacts his team a lot more. And if you look at Boston's roster, they've got a ton of guys on that team that can contribute every night. Whereas John Wall, who's got the Wizards in the second seed, he's not doing it with a whole lot of help.
Yeah, and I think you could make the argument that John Wall probably makes his teammates better than Isaiah Thomas makes his teammates better. So for me, that's the easy argument. Well, let's move on to shooting guard. I think this isn't quite as interesting. At number 1, we have DeMar DeRozan. Number 2, Klay Thompson. Number 3, CJ McCollum. Number 4, Bradley Beal. Number 5, Dwayne Wade. And let me mention, Jimmy Butler's not on this list. He was moved to small forward. So with that list said, what do you guys like?
I like the list. It's interesting to see Dwayne Wade. He kind of disappeared this season. He's not been in the news too much. But off the top of my head, I can't think of anybody who I'd replace him with. So, I like the rankings. I think – sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm agreeing with you on Dwayne Wade. I was thinking about the 5th spot, and like a lot of guys have been banged up, missing time, and with Jimmy Butler moving over, it was like Dwayne Wade is still a really good player if you really think about it. I think he averages like 18 a game, and he's still able to make plays, smart basketball plays, and you'd want him in a playoff game. So I was okay with it. I wouldn't really change much either.
I think Beal might be better than McCollum as of right now.
That's a good point.
As of right now.
You could argue Beal has a higher defensive potential than obviously McCollum. McCollum struggled defensively. Beal's not a consistent defensive player, but when he locks in defensively like playoff time, I think he can really have an impact.
Yeah, and DeRozan has struggled. DeRozan hasn't been himself. I know he's without Lowry, and he's still
he's had to carry that team a little bit.
Yeah, he's still the best shooting guard in basketball, but he's definitely his play of late seems to have dipped a little bit. His production.
It's interesting that we have so many star names at point guard, and then shooting guard, it kind of dies down a little bit. Not to say these aren't great players, but the hype isn't really there.
Yeah, and just to build off your point about DeMar's production, it probably has a lot to do with Kyle being out. When you replace Kyle with Corey Joseph doesn't really stretch the floor, and because DeMar does most of his damage in the paint, it really shrinks the floor for him, right? So
that's a very good point. And I mean, anytime you lose a player like Kyle Lowry just for that time and the attention he's going to bring, not only offensively, he's just going to take the load off of you. You're not going to have to handle the ball quite as much, and you're going to get set up in the spots that you like because we know they have some great chemistry.
Absolutely.
Small forward, it's not really much crazy about here. LeBron at number 1, Kawhi at number 2, KD at 3, Giannis at number 4, and Jimmy Butler at number 5.
I don't see any reason why Kevin Durant should be anything lower than number 2.
I think part of it is because of the injury.
But he only just went down though, right?
Yeah, at the time the rankings were submitted, it was like right on the time that he was injured. So I think that probably played some of the impact. And then Kawhi caught that extra hype. I think if both healthy, I think he would be at number 2. But I agree, I would still have Kevin Durant as the second best small forward when healthy.
Even with 2 broken arms, I'd still take Kevin Durant.
Yeah, it's amazing when, like you've done these rankings and Durant injured, Leonard's MVP candidacy picked up a little bit of juice. But I think any basketball fan with a brain would tell you if they started their team tomorrow, they're going to tell you Kevin Durant every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
I think Kawhi has closed the gap, though.
He
has, especially with his recent play. And I think they've mentioned it a lot, and it's a very true fact that Kawhi's impact defensively is very big. But obviously, KD's stepped up as a defender this year on Golden State.
I think what's helping Durant a little bit. Sorry, John. What's helping Durant a little bit is also the dip in the level of play of the Warriors. A lot of people just assume that because they were a 73-win team without him last year, that's the kind of production you'd see. But to lose a guy like that who you had to adjust anyway to make those things work, we see what kind of impact he had on them this year so far.
I actually think Kawhi took a step back defensively. With the offensive load that he's to carry this season. I think
I agree that he's taking it back, but he's taking on such a bigger load. But when it comes down to it, when it's like the 2-minute stretch, like we saw, I think against Houston, I mentioned this on the other podcast, he's still able to lock down. So it's obviously he's not going to be able to have that type of energy all game, but I think he's shown more as a complete player this season that would make me close the gap on Kevin Durant.
I agree, but I definitely think Durant's in Durant's defense, Durant's closed the gap Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I understand that too. But then you can make the argument, well, Durant's also playing on the best team in basketball, and if you don't get better playing with Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, then Kawhi's got LaMarcus Aldridge, who's probably still an all-star caliber player, but other than that, like, it's not like he's got a lot of talent on that team, and they're right behind the Warriors for that number 1 seed.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you guys think about Giannis coming in here at number 4 and Jimmy Butler at 5?
I'd probably have them the other way around, but I mean, that would come down to personal preference. I'd probably have Jimmy Butler at number 4 and Giannis at number 5. But
what about you, Harris? I mean, the Greek Freak has played. He's almost like a point forward at this point. The amount that he handles the basketball. I think he's done enough. I think that's a toss up too, but I think the Greek Freak has done enough this year to put himself ahead of Butler. I think I'd start. Sometimes that's how I try to answer these questions. Who I'd start my team with.
One interesting thing about Giannis, he's in the top 5 in blocks per game this season, averaging 1.9.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool. But I agree with Butler is more consistent. We've seen Giannis kind of dip up and down all season, but going forward, I think Giannis will probably take a step ahead of Jimmy maybe next year. But right now, Jimmy still has the edge on him.
Also, on the outside looking in, Gordon Hayward, I think at times has been in the rankings hovering around that 5 or 6 spot.
He's very consistent, and you kind of always know what you're getting with Gordon Hayward. And the Jazz are quietly scaring some people out west.
Yes.
We didn't even mention Paul George.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
And Paul George.
Crazy. I know that's a topic of discussion. Paul George's name was definitely one of those in the trade discussions a lot. And I think since then he's kind of been the Paul George we've expected him to be. I know it's crazy that we didn't threw Hayward's name before George, but that's no indication of how I feel. I think the George Butler discussion is obviously one that we've had before.
I mean, George can easily get himself back on this list next month and at the number 4 spot, because I think he's just as capable of both of these guys. So, but power forward, this is the one that I probably am we've done these rankings for almost about a year and a half now, and most of the time I'm like, all right, I can at least see the points, but the power forward one is pretty fucked up, to be honest. We got Anthony Davis at number 1.
You need that KG cuss button from the.
I do. I guess so.
Area 21.
Shout out to KG. But number 1, Anthony Davis. All right, that makes sense. Number 2, Draymond Green. Number 3, Paul Millsap. Number 4, LaMarcus Aldridge. Number 5, Blake Griffin. So
what are your biggest problems with that?
I mean, I'll let you guys go first.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna take the unpopular vote here, and I'm gonna say I don't think Draymond Green's a top 5 power forward.
Oh,
I don't think he's a top 5 power forward.
Who would you replace him with?
I'd think. Well, first of all, I'd have Kevin Love on that list ahead of Draymond.
Well, just subtract Kevin Love because he's out with injury, so he's not. We don't really put him in the voting system.
Fair. Okay, then I would probably have Griffin. I'd probably have all 3 of those guys ahead of Draymond. And then if I had to put somebody in the, I guess since Kevin Love is out, you can put Draymond in the number 5 spot. But the second best power forward in the NBA, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I would probably have Blake up there at number 2. Obviously, he hasn't been his full level yet, but he's still showing the flashes where I'm like, all right, Blake can still take over a game. So I would probably have Blake. I don't hate Draymond. He hasn't had an amazing season, but I see his impact throughout the floor. So I would probably still keep Draymond at number 3 or 4. Him and Millsap can kind of swap. I know I got in a huge argument with some kid on Twitter about that. I'd have Aldridge as 5 just because, like, he's so inconsistent at times, and you see games where, like, you don't even know Aldridge is playing. Like, at Draymond, I know he doesn't always produce, but you always know his impact in the game. You can see his energy, even if it's for the better or the worse. There will be a game where you see the Spurs and Aldridge will have like under 10 points and like 6 rebounds, and you're like, bro, you're supposed to be an all-star. Obviously, part of it's their system, but Harris, what about you?
Jonathan, are you holding the groin kicks against Draymond Green right now?
I'm not. I actually forgot about the groin kicks, but now that you mention it, he's not even a top 10 anymore.
I don't know. I mean, for me, he's still had a better year than Aldridge. I know Aldridge has done some nice things with San Antonio, and I think what's hurting Griffin's actually been real good lately. I think what's hurt him is that he was out for a while. but I would, if you like, honestly, would listen to Grit. At the Millsap's actually been pretty good too. But if you want to knock down Draymond Green, I think you can knock him down to third, maybe fourth. I think it would be tough for me to see him as fifth. I just see the anchor and what he's been able to do for that ball club, and his ability on the defensive end. But I could see that. I mean, to me, after Davis, this is all toss-ups anyway, just because I don't think anyone's really solidified themselves as the second best power forward.
I think Blake can when he's healthy.
Yes, exactly. I definitely agree with that. He has to be definitely himself, and when he's injury free, I think all three of us would agree that he's the second best power forward in basketball.
Yeah. I mean, I know I like Draymond. Like, obviously, I don't like his off-court antics, but I like his versatility. You know, his ability to play multiple positions, defend multiple positions, and I'd kind of love to see what he'd do on another team. Just to see his impact, or with the ball in his hands more, and see if he would be a better or if he would be a worse player not playing with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. What do you guys think about this? Do you think he would be better or worse in a bigger role, or around the same?
Yeah. The guy shoots 42% from the field, and he's got all those guys on his team.
Yeah.
I know that he's not asked to score a lot. I know that's not his job per se, but I mean, you'd expect somebody that would get as many wide open looks as Draymond to shoot a little bit more efficiently, be a little bit more potent offensively. To me, I think there's a bunch of guys in the league that you could put into that position and they'd be extremely successful.
But do you think they would be quite the playmaker? Like, I think that's an underrated fact about Draymond is they haven't run it as quite as much with Kevin Durant on there, but the big selling factor for the Warriors in the finals the last 2 years was running the pick and roll with Draymond and Steph Curry. And then when they would double Steph, they'd rotate to Draymond. He'd be able to make the right pass and hit the guy in the corner and get the open shot or initiate the offense from that point. And a lot of power forwards aren't quite as comfortable with the ball handling in that position and making that pass in such a big moment.
And that's fair, but at the same time, with the guys that he has or has had around him, is pretty easy when you know pretty much everybody on the court is a lights out shooter. So I think he's an overrated playmaker, but I still think he's a really good playmaker. And that's probably the best part of his game. But outside of that and outside of his defense, I don't see him adding too much value to any team.
Jonathan, do you think that now that he's shooting, last year shot 49% from field, 38 from three, are those numbers down by coincidence? Are they down because Durant's taking up some areas on the floor and he's had to adjust in certain ways? Why do you think those numbers are down?
If I were to make a decision right now, it's because last year was an outlier. Because his numbers this season are way more in line with his career averages. Granted, it's a short career, but I just don't see the appeal with Draymond. I get what he brings to the table, and I know how valuable he is to the Warriors. But I think if you take him off that team and put him anywhere else, the value plummets.
Harris, what do you think?
I think to a certain extent, he's. I mean, it's a tough argument to have because I think to a certain extent, he can be a product of that environment. But I think he's going to have a positive impact on most locker rooms he goes to. He's more of like an intangible guy. You look at nothing really pops out to you. I think he's one of those guys he needs to be there for them to win. Obviously now with Durant there, his impact might be lessened, but I think, he's one of those intangible players that, you need most championship caliber teams need a guy like that on your roster that's willing to do the dirty work, no pun intended, with some of the work that he's done and what he's known for. But I think if you put him on the Knicks wouldn't benefit from having a guy like him on their team. I think they definitely would.
They would benefit, but I don't think he'd be the player he is in Golden State.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I think a big stretch for Draymond, and it'll kind of help this argument right here, is the next few weeks because they'll be without Durant. He'll be relied on more offensively, and it'll be interesting to see if he can step up. And they're not quite as talented depth-wise as they were last season, so he'll need to do more. Yeah, because we obviously know Steph and Klay aren't really like shooting lights out right now, and someone's got to step up for that team, or they're going to lose the 1 seed.
Possible.
Yeah, and enough about that. Moving on from power forwards, we'll talk centers. Not crazy, but DeMarcus Cousins number 1, Karl Anthony Towns number 2, Marcus Gasol number 3, DeAndre Jordan number 4, Rudy Gobert number 5.
The only one I The only person I would put in that list that isn't there is Hassan Whiteside, especially with the way the Heat have been playing lately. I'm surprised because he was in there earlier this season. I'm surprised he fell out.
Yeah, I think injuries. You know, he had a little inconsistent stretch when he came back from injuries. But who would you swap out for him?
Probably DeAndre.
Oof.
Probably
I
DeAndre.
think that would be the fair one.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say my change, I'd probably put Rudy above DeAndre.
Yeah.
And I think since the trade, you could argue Towns has been better than Cousins.
Yeah, and I was just about to come in and say that Towns is to me might be the best. He's playing like the best big in basketball at times. Forget just center specifically. I just love what I've seen from him. Excuse me. I love what I've seen from him recently. I think he's been amongst the best bigs in basketball.
Yeah, I'd probably put Towns ahead of Cousins as well. Even before the trade, the way he's been playing this stretch of the season, he's been a top 5 player in the league, really.
Yeah, his versatility is something too. You know, his ability to move so well on the floor, it's something that Cousins doesn't really have, and he's not quite as athletic as Towns is. What do you guys think about Marc Gasol at number 3? I know Gasol's averaging like 20 points. I think around 6 rebounds, which is pretty low for everybody on this list. How do you guys feel about that?
I'm a big fan of Marc Gasol, so I'm okay with him being at number 3 because a lot of the value that he adds doesn't show up on the stat sheet. He's a great help side defender. He's a great post defender. He's a great
high basketball IQ.
Extremely high basketball IQ. Can score from just about anywhere in a half court set. So I know a lot of the stuff that he doesn't show up on the box score, but I do think he's probably a better overall player than Gobert, Jordan, or Whiteside.
Yeah, he's going to make a bigger impact on the game.
I've always been high on Gasol. Never really had an issue with him being considered a top 3 center. I know doesn't he have an All NBA? I don't know about first team. I know he started in the All-Star game a couple years ago, but his resume is.
It's a defensive player of the year award as well.
Yeah, he's quietly building a nice resume for himself, and like you guys said, high IQ, plays the high-low game well, and I think one of the few guys in the league that truly maximizes his ability and for his physicality and who he is as an athlete. He's not the best athlete in the world, not the quickest guy, but seems to kind of know how to get the most out of his talent and ability.
Plays angles well too. You know, when you're not the fastest guy, you just got to be able to, make the smart decision. So we talked about players. We talked about top 5 point guards, shooting guards, small forwards, power forwards, centers. Now let's talk top 5 teams. Give me, guys, your top 5 teams right now. Not what you think is going to win the finals or when they're healthy. Right now, top 5 teams in order.
I'd probably go Cleveland, Golden State, San Antonio, Houston, and then Washington.
Harris, what do you got?
You kind of stole my thunder with the Wizards, Nick. I'm high on them right now.
Yeah.
I think the Jazz are closing in. I'm not going to put them in the top 5 yet, but I think they're going to continue to rise the ranks, and by the end of the season might be considered right in that area. I'm not going to do it yet, but I still think Warriors 1, Cleveland 2, San Antonio 3, Houston 4, and Washington 5. I think it's hard to really. I mean, you want to put Cleveland 1, fine. You want to flip-flop the Rockets and Spurs. That's also fine. I think it's very hard to argue and throw another team in the mix there.
Yeah, I'm going to go number 1 with Cavs. Number 2, Warriors, just because KD's out, or I think I'd probably have him at 1 still. Number 3, Spurs, but this LaMarcus Aldridge, I know it's a minor heart issue, but anytime missing a player like that could be an issue. Then Houston, and I'm going to put the Jazz at number 5 because they've been more consistent, in my opinion, than Boston and Washington. And I like their depth on that team too, and I think they just kind of fly under the radar. Nobody really talks about them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's mad at you for making that argument. It's something that I've thought about. I think they're right there. And
they're getting Rodney Hood back, who's a very good player. I think a lot of people forget about him. He gives them a nice 2-guard. He can score a little bit, gives them more defense. And George Hill's been, as long as he can stay healthy for them, nobody really wants to play them in a 7-game series.
Yeah, Jazz Wizards in a 7-game series, you'd have to think twice about that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the Jazz also play defense and really good defense, and a lot of teams do that all the time. So, and having a player like Rudy Gobert down there, though, I think the disappointing thing maybe for the Jazz this season has been Derek Favors. he started off the season injured, and he's really not found his rhythm like he has the last 2 seasons. So that could probably be maybe an issue someone would point to.
But like you said, they're so solid defensively. They have so much length and athleticism at just about every position. I mean, even George Hill at point guard.
Exactly.
He's one of the better defenders at that position. So yeah, they're a great team. You're actually making me second guess the Wizards.
Yeah, I mean, and I like Joe Johnson off the bench too. Obviously, you guys know I'm a Nets fan, but having Joe, I think in the playoffs is a nice player to have, and he can help you hit some big shots come playoff time. It'll be really interesting to see the West playoffs. And I'm really to see if Houston can kind of get fully on clicking. And like we have kind of died down on the Houston hype, even though Lou Williams got really hot a few games for them after the deadline. Like the Spurs and Warriors have been the main talk. It'll be interesting if people start to hop on that Houston bandwagon a little more, especially with the injuries to San Antonio and Golden State.
That Houston could potentially now could be a Houston Thunder series. Could be very interesting in the first round.
That'd be so many stat lines.
Yeah, because we already know that we'll pretty much know who the MVP is by that time, and to have those two square off in the first round will be fun.
Well, talking about that, I wanted to ask you guys. We're going to do a segment called Jump Ball in a little bit, but I want to ask you guys, who would you like to see get the 8th seed for both conferences? Let's start with the West because we're talking about that. Who would you like to see? I mean, get that 1 and 8 matchup. What would you like to have?
Right now, I think I'd like to see Dallas get just because I hate to see Dirk Nowitzki spend the twilight of his career watching postseason basketball. There's just something about the last 20 years and how often Dallas was in the playoffs and how many great moments he had. It would be nice for him to sneak in and put a few more of those. Yeah, put a few more of those performances together where we can kind of look back and say, wow, he was even doing it at 38.
What about you, Harris? You want to see grab the 8th seed and possibly match up with your Golden State Warriors?
My God! Oh, here we go again.
Your Stephen Curry Golden State Warriors.
Here we go again. I don't know how this becomes my title. Anyway, I would like to see in a perfect. I want to see the Nuggets stay where they're at. I want to see Joe. I want to see because I think he's a potential. I'm going to say MVP candidate. It might be a stretch, but he's one of the real stories of this NBA season and one of the nice young players in the league. So Jokic in the first round, that would mean Lillard, no Nowitzki. We know the Pelicans probably won't catch anybody now.
What about Minnesota? Do you guys think Minnesota can make the push for the 8th spot? Is that that thing? They're 2.5 out.
Yeah, if I didn't want to see Dirk in the playoffs, I'd probably be rooting for Minnesota. I like that team. I love Towns, and it's nice to see a Canadian player in the NBA making some noise in Andrew Wiggins. So I'd probably be rooting for them if it wasn't for Dallas.
That's my pick. I'm going to go with the T-Wolves.
You guys just convinced me. I'd rather see them than Denver.
Wiggins and Towns, and especially after they just beat the Warriors last night, like I could see a really fun series.
Wait, it was Thibodeau's first season with Minnesota, right?
Yeah. So this would be like, wait, is it his first or a second?
Might be his second.
It's his first.
Yeah, it's his first. So that would be like, I think that would be a really good series. I could even see the Wolves winning. Depending on the Durant injury, I could see the Wolves winning 2 games. Because you have to imagine, like, Durant's going to come back. He's not going to instantly find his rhythm. Like, isn't he in like a wheelchair on crutches or something? So he's not like putting any pressure on his legs. So it's not like he's conditioned or anything like that.
Kerr's probably not going to try and run him into the ground.
Exactly. Yeah. And we've noted it before, like their depth just isn't as good as it was the last 2 seasons. They needed Durant because they needed him to play his minutes. So I think that would be really fun. After that, I like Portland just because I like watching Dame Lillard, especially in the underdog role. Like Denver's cool, but they'll probably be in the postseason next season just because I think
you could also make the argument that if there was a team that posed a threat to the Warriors dynasty, maybe like obviously outside of the Spurs, the Rockets are going to be there, but the Timberwolves aren't like that far away from being a perennial 50-win team. Like this is not a team that like we saw the Thunder come up this way with their young pieces like 5, 6, 7 years ago. Like if you had to make an argument, they're one of the teams that posed a threat for the Warriors just rattling off consecutive Western Conference titles.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think you look at the Towns matchup in this situation is, they're going to put Zaza and JaVale McGee on town. So obviously the Timberwolves have a huge matchup advantage in that situation. I think one thing that just kills me, and I even watched it last night in the Warriors and Timberwolves game, at the end of the stretch, Ricky Rubio's lack of jump shot just hurts their offense so much. And I just feel like if he got hot in the postseason, he could hit some jumpers. That would be huge for them.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he is with a different team come preseason next year.
Yeah, no, me too. I mean, the T-Wolves have been trying to move him for quite some time. They could just use like a playmaking type player that has the ability to pass and shoot.
And also, sorry, Nick, keep going.
No, go ahead, Harris.
No, I was saying with Rubio, it's almost like I feel like the Timberwolves have been trying to move him for so long. It's just no team or situation has presented itself that they want to get good value back for him.
And it's hard to get value for. I mean, I've said this a lot of times, and people think I'm like a little bit crazy, but I just really think it's hard to start a point guard that can't shoot.
I completely agree.
If you can't shoot the three in the NBA nowadays, it's pretty hard to be a successful point guard just for the fact that the athletes are so quick, players are so long, there's just not that much room on the floor. And I don't think people understand that is if you're just hurting your team so much. I can pretty much help on the guy with the ball the whole time because you can't shoot, and I'm probably athletic enough to recover and contest your bad jump shot. So
who's the 8th seed in the East?
Oh, yeah, we got to talk East. The East, so that's an interesting one. We're going to assume the Cavs will land that 1 seed. So who would you guys like to see get that 8 seed?
I'd love to see a Miami Cavs series.
Oh, yeah. Agreed.
Would you love to see it because you believe that Miami can like scare them a little bit, or just because of the history, or both?
I don't think they can. I think it would be a sweep, but I would just like to see Dion Waiters and LeBron James going back and forth because I know there's bad blood there. You know those two guys don't like each other, so
yeah. So
there's bad blood within the organizations. Like, does anyone want to see like 15 bro hugs with LeBron and Dwayne Wade? Or I mean, you can make the argument. You can make the argument for the Cavs Bucks series because you want to see a guy like the Greek Freak get some more playoff experience. But I think the reason why you say Pat Riley, Spoelstra, there's history. Dragic and Whiteside have turned that team around, and they could go in with some momentum. And speaking of the Eastern Conference, I don't know if I've ever seen a year where 1-8 was separated by only 11.5 games. Like the Cavs have obviously slowed down and are 5-5 in their last 10, but 1-8 to be only separated by 11.5, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, no, it is. There's still could be a lot of movement in the standings.
Yeah.
But so for me, for the 8th seed, I don't know. I kind of would like to see Milwaukee, to see Giannis. But Miami obviously would be interesting. I think Miami might be able to steal a game. I know, like, Spoelstra's been a great coach, and they've done some really interesting things. And he would probably come up with a weird dynamic to beat them for at least one game. And they just beat the Cavs twice. And, like, the Heat just have some, like irrational confidence right now because they've won so many games. They've turned it around so much. So I think it'd be cool to see them go from being, like, the second or third worst team in the Eastern Conference to an 8 seed.
Yeah, I feel like that's how you've described the Miami Heat over the last 30 games, irrational confidence.
Yeah, because I mean,
11-30 to 20-4 in their last 24 games.
Yeah, and you see some of the shots Dion Waiters is taking. You know, like that guy's confidence is at an all-time high.
Yeah,
and people like I've read some things by like GMs and scouts that NBA media has posted, and like they're saying they like he's playing at such a great level, and a lot of it has to do with Spoelstra getting the best out of him. And I mean, we all knew the talent was there because I remember people were really hyped when LeBron came back to Cleveland. They still had Dion, and they're like, "Oh, Dion's going to be top 10 shooting guard in the league." It never really worked out like that, but now you're kind of starting to see that talent right now.
Yep, and then Waiters got bounced in OKC also.
Yeah, but he did have a nice stretch in the postseason for them. So, I mean, you've always seen the flashes there. He's just starting to be a lot more consistent now. But like I mentioned, we got a new segment on the NBA Outlet. We're going to call this the jump ball. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to present you guys questions. You're going to respond in a quick matter, just like a jump ball. It's up quick, comes down real quick, got to make a decision. So you guys ready?
Let's go.
All right.
Sounds good.
MVP for this season, James Harden, Russell Westbrook.
James Harden.
Westbrook.
Better future, New York Knicks, Brooklyn Nets.
Brooklyn Nets. I don't know.
I'm going to say Knicks.
Oh, Harris, that was harsh. All right. more postseason success: Boston Celtics, Washington Wizards.
Boston Celtics.
Oof.
Harris,
I'm
quick,
gonna
come on.
also say Celtics.
So yeah, you better hurry up. Better player: Paul George, Jimmy Butler.
Who's the first player?
Paul George or Jimmy Butler? Better player overall.
Jimmy Butler.
A better player: Kristaps Porzingis, Nikola Jokic.
Porzingis.
Jokic.
Better coach: Steve Kerr, Brad Stevens.
Brad Stevens.
Kerr.
What do you prefer to see, an ankle breaker or a poster? Fast.
Poster.
All right, greatest of all time: Michael Jordan or LeBron James?
Michael Jordan.
Prefer to watch ESPN or TNT?
TNT.
And what do you like to see? 3 points from an and one or a 3-point shot?
3 points from an and one.
3-point shot. You know me, Nick.
And that wraps it up for the jump ball. And surprisingly, you guys disagreed on almost everything. So
No, there was some agreeing in there.
We both agreed on Michael Jordan, although I don't know if you ask me that in a couple of years, I don't know if I'll have the same answer.
yeah, LeBron still has some time. What was the hardest question?
That one right there, the Michael Jordan, LeBron James one was the hardest one for me.
Hardest question. Kerr Stevens, surprisingly, I had to think about that one. Wizards Celtics, I think, could be an interesting second round series the way it's formatted right now. That's the way it looks like it's going to go down if both those teams win the first round. And Kerr and Porzingis and Jokic is a tough one too.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to make them all pretty hard. Which was the easiest?
Probably the and one versus the 3-point shot for me, because I love and one plays. I always have, and just nothing better than hearing that whistle after a poster, right?
Yeah, and then you see the ref like come down with his hand mad hard with emphatic, like bang, it counts.
Yeah.
Harris, what about you? Easiest one?
Yeah, for the easy one, poster over the ankle breaker. I think we see. I'm sure the even amount, but I've always wanted to see, even though I'm a guard, I'd rather see the poster than the ankle breaker. And also,
Favorite poster of all time?
It's so hard not to say Vince Carter over Frederick Weiss. And then Vince Carter had several. We had Vince Carter over Alonzo Mourning.
That's probably my favorite. That like the poster in the Olympics is cool with Vince Carter, but Alonzo Mourning was like one of the most feared shot blockers in the NBA still at that time. Like he was a little bit older, but people were still scared to go in there and dunk on him. And Vince was a little bit up there in age anyways, and he fucking threw that shit down. I remember watching that as a Nets fan. I was like, God damn, Vince.
I have to say the best poster I ever saw was Dwayne Wade over Anderson Varejao. I came right out of my seat when I saw that one. That was the craziest dunk I've ever seen.
And talking about some Canadian dunks for you, I think Andrew Wiggins had some fucking nasty dunks on Rudy Gobert.
Oh, yeah. That kid can jump. That kid has got some hops.
He has like springs in his legs because he like pops off the ground. It's crazy. Him and Zach LaVine.
Yeah, those two guys are ridiculous.
I'm going to also say the easiest one, much to Jonathan's dislike, is that I think at this point we have to concede the MVP to Westbrook, and I know he doesn't want to do it.
I don't know. We have to concede it just yet.
It's not over yet. It's not.
I don't think the Thunder have won enough games. I don't think you can give an MVP to a 7 seed or a 6 seed. I think he's got to at least get into the top 5, and if he gets in the top 5, then we can talk about it. But we're talking about a point guard who's he could pull it off, absolutely. But I think if the season ended today, with him shooting 42% from the field and them having such a low seed, I don't think you can ignore what Harden's done all season. That team wasn't expected to do nearly as much as they've done.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the thing that's ignored about Harden is that he's leading the league in assists.
Yeah.
It's not like, he's averaging 28 and 11. Obviously, Westbrook's averaging more rebounds by like 2, though, because Harden's almost averaging 8 rebounds. He's not really that efficient either, but I think like the difference is the wins. But it's hard because if Russell averages a triple-double, which he's close to not being doing right now because he's only averaging 10.1 assists, so he's close to falling underneath that threshold. If he averages a triple-double just for the fact of history, I think that might give him some extra votes.
Harris, if Russell Westbrook finishes with 30, 10, and 9.9, do you still think he's the MVP?
Yeah, I don't look too much. Honestly, I don't really – that honestly is not the main ingredient that I'm looking for into the MVP recipe for him. I think it's more important for them to try to finish closer to, like you said, 46, 47, 48 wins maybe jump the Clippers if they get hot. But if they finish like they are now, it is going to be a little bit tougher for him. But I just think start to finish, he's been the best player in the league all year. I think it's not just – I'm not specifically looking at his numbers, although they are off the charts. I just think coming off – and I don't know if this plays a role into your mind, but coming off what happened over the offseason, losing arguably the second best player in the league to the best team in the league and keeping that team where it's at right now, I just think at this point it's like, wow, this guy just freaking deserves this thing, man.
Well, and I think another argument you can make for Westbrook over Harden is obviously Harden has a lot more talent on his team. And if you look at the Thunder, they've had Steven Adams, Victor Oladipo, and his Cantor, but like none of those guys are like all-star potential or like anything that's like, oh my God, they're great players. And I think when you look at Houston, they have a lot more talent along not even just starters, but on the bench as well. They have two former Six-Man of the Year one former Six-Man of the Year on their team and possibly another Six-Man of the Year on their team right now in Eric Gordon. So,
but still, they don't really have a number two guy that makes you lose sleep either.
I mean, yeah, but they're all like they can pretty much what their offense is like, all right, we're going to give the ball to Harden. He's going to create. We have people who can score on all ends of the floor. We have Trevor Ariza, Ryan Anderson. We can put out Gordon. We can put out Williams. Patrick Beverly can shoot a little bit, and Clint Capella can finish alley-oop. So like, he doesn't have like all stars, but all the players are good players. Where you look at when you look at OKC, you could look at some of those guys and you're like, he really can't do anything on offense other than make a layup and dunk, or he's an inconsistent 3-point shooter. And it's like closing the floor for Westbrook, and he has to tower over 4 guys just to score a layup.
That's fair, but I also think that Harden gets the best out of those guys. And, at least in
that's true too.
They have. I don't think Westbrook gets enough out of the guys around him. Even though he's averaging the 10 assists, a lot of them are just handoffs at the basket, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would think he makes Steven Adams better. It's hard to say like he doesn't make it's his guards and forwards better because I don't think he trusts them. Because obviously Andre Robertson has missed his fair share of threes and especially big threes. Same thing with Victor Oladipo. He hasn't really been as good as they hoped he'd be in OKC. And McDermott, I think he's trying to trust him, but McDermott hasn't hit his shots as well. Taj, I felt like was a good fit with that team, and he kind of has a similar mentality to Westbrook, like where you definitely can see a chemistry there. So I guess OKC's like idea going to the playoffs probably would just be like, let's attack inside, let's dominate inside. We have some good bigs, and Westbrook's the best when he attacks the rim.
Yeah, 2 last points, and also imagine Westbrook's numbers in D'Antoni's system, like what he would, what the inflation could be like. It could be like 35, 15, and 50. And also, could we possibly ever see co-MVPs, or that wouldn't happen?
I don't think it'd happen.
Yeah, it'd be unlikely, but it technically probably could happen, but I don't think it would happen. I think over this next month, someone's going to kind of pull away. If you recall, Harris, the first year we did the podcast, it was a really close race all year, and it was between Curry, Harden, and Westbrook. And then in the last month, Curry just kind of pulled away from everybody.
In 2015?
Yeah. So I think we could probably see one of the two pull away in this next month. But that wraps it up for today. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Jonathan, thanks for hopping on. Great stuff today. And Harris, as always, great job.
Yep.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's always a good time.
Yep. Thanks for coming on, Jonathan, and enjoy the games tonight, and we'll see you guys next week.